Welcome to the September edition of At the Table. We'll be talking with author Tim Miller, and later on in the show, we'll be on location in Highland Park, checking in and seeing how the city is doing in the wake of the July 4th parade massacre. But first up, Tim Miller. Joining me now is Tim Miller, the author of the New York Times bestseller, Why We Did It, a travelogue from the Republican road to hell. Tim Miller is on Team Normal. He's a leader in the anti-Trump movement, former Republican operative. I think that's how I got to know him. Right now, a lot of you are familiar with Tim because he's an MSNBC analyst. He's a writer at The Bulwark. He was the communications director for Jeb Bush's 2012 presidential campaign, 2016 presidential campaign. And he was the RNC spokesman for the 2012 campaign when Mitt Romney was the Republican candidate. Now, if Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney tell you something about Tim's politics, I think you're right. So anyway, Tim, thanks for joining us. We have a lot to cover, and for our viewers especially, I know we want to talk about what you think is the future of Adam Kenzinger, the Illinois congressman who's on the January 6th committee. But I just want to at least read a few passages from your book to set up our conversation. As we talk about what we may agree is a pretty dangerous time for our democracy in the United States, what with almost every day, either a revelation on the run-up to the January 6th insurrection and former President Trump's attempt to overthrow the election, to the FBI raid at his Mar-a-Lago estate looking for records covered by the Presidential Records Act that he took. But anyway, we'll get to all this. So everybody, let me just tell you what Tim wrote.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so remember, I just set this up that America's pretty much in a pickle. Well, it's because of Tim. That's what he says. America never would have gotten into this mess if it weren't for me and my friends. We were the normal Republicans, the pragmatic and practical, the adults in the room you hear so much about. Now, I'm skipping a little bit, but at first, gradually, after everything they knew about Trump, first gradually, he writes, and then suddenly, nearly all of us decided to go along. The same people who roasted Donald Trump as an incompetent menace in private served his rancid baloney in public when convenient. And they decided to do so even after the January 6th attack on the Capitol. So, Tim, I want to go through a case study with you on a person who I actually knew when she was a student. And so there is, so Tim in this book tells his story, his journey of being a Republican operative, of dealing with his coming out as a gay man in an environment that sometimes did not welcome gays and lesbians. So some of this is a little bit of a memoir in the book, and some of it is his own exploration to why he went along at first, and then he talks to the people who did. But there's a woman who is a state representative from New York, whose name is Elise Stefaniken. Of the case studies that you do, Tim, I want to if we're going to smush together Elise Stefaniken, because I knew her when she was a student at Harvard. She was a protege of Ken Duberstein. And again, for our listeners who don't know Ken Duberstein, moderate to conservative, but certainly establishment Republican. Not anyone who would come close to a conspiracy theorist or an election denier. Elise had a safe district in New York. And then as soon as the January 6th attack happened, and some Republicans seemed to defend it, Liz Cheney, still in leadership, made it clear what she thought. She was one of the 10 Republicans to vote to impeach Trump. And then Elise Stefaniken becomes a person that I didn't think I knew. So can you just tell us and condense what you write about her and her journey, what it shows about the state of the party today.
Sure. It's so good to be with you, Lynn, a legend. After all this time reading you, we have dealt with each other a little bit, but I'm a quasi-journalist now. I'm a writer. We're on the same side of this deal now, so it's so good to be here. Um, Elise, the people I wrote in the book, with really one exception, all of the characters in the book were people that I knew really well before I started writing the book, and it's because I get into people's motivations. That's the whole point of the book. It's called "Why We Did It." Why, there have been plenty of great reporters you've had on this podcast, and you yourself and others who have done the what part of what is going on. But I tried to get at the why, and I felt like to do that, I had to deal with people that I had either worked with or knew. And so Elise and I worked together on the 2012 GOP autopsy, which, if people don't remember, basically was, recommending that the party it was a reskin of the compassionate conservatism, frankly. How can the party, appeal more to the diversifying America, to suburban women? How do we not turn these people off? Elise was the editor of that document. She doesn't. This isn't on her bio anymore, but so I was the spokesman, as you said at the time. So we worked very closely on getting this document together. Then she runs for Congress with that document as basically the blueprint, and hires a bunch of other young millennial, pro-gay, believe in climate change Republicans who are like, this is the future of the party. And some of them who I interviewed told me that this was the best they ever felt about a campaign. It was the most hopeful. It was exactly the type of Republican they wanted to work for. And it acts this way, all the way through like Trump's first year. She never mentions him, doesn't tweet about him, is basically indistinguishable from Adam Kenzinger, right? All the way through like 2017 or 18. And then during the first impeachment, she flips on a dime and basically says, I can get a lot more juice if I'm defending Trump full throatedly. And then obviously, as you mentioned, she shivs Liz Cheney. So the question is why? Well, everyone I called to ask gave me the same answer, which is this is what her voters want. This is what the voters want. She's a representative representing the voters. But I was like, that's not really right. It didn't land right with me, because she's in New York right next to John Katko, who voted to impeach. And their districts are right next to each other. They have very similar districts in the kind of Albany, Buffalo, Exeter kind of region. And so I was like, that isn't right. And what I discovered as I interviewed more and more people and like thought back about it is that Elise Stefaniken just decided that she wanted the brass ring, that she wanted the cheers. Like, she could have survived as a congresswoman probably by being more skeptical, being less vocal, but she couldn't have been on the trajectory that she's on. And right now she's on, I think, a short list to be Donald Trump's VP next time, and a short list to be a Speaker of the House. And so it's paid off for her.
Well, as you raise the question throughout the book, at what cost? But you too, at some point, you write about, you were blind to this. You kind of thought it was icky, but you did it anyway. You flirted with Steve Bannon. You wanted to get your Oppo research into Breitbart and other outlets. You even, and this surprised me, I didn't realize it, once Trump was elected, you even helped Scott Pruitt get confirmed as the EPA administrator. Mm-hmm. Tell us what was going through your mind. I mean, I know because I read it, but for people who haven't, what on earth?
Well, this is embarrassing to always say in the interviews, but the whole point of this is just to be honest. This stuff is exhilarating, right? It just is. And so I get what Elise is doing grosses me out, right? But I had it at the smaller level, right? If I'm pitching a big story that's on the front page of the newspaper the next day, or, we're on Fox, or I'm, at these parties and people want to talk to me, and I'm the intermediary between Steve Bannon and his, his little machinations and, the more normal Republicans, the Jeb Bushes and the Paul Ryans. That is exciting, right? There's an exciting element to it. When the stakes felt lower, I didn't reflect on it to the degree that I should have. And then as Trump wins, obviously the stakes started to feel a lot higher. I started to look back at my actions and think, gosh, the stuff that I found exhilarating was actually very damaging. It had a lot of real world impact that I just didn't spend enough time really focusing on what the potential consequences of my actions are. And that, I think, continues for all the people who continue to work there. They are in this bubble in DC where they're protected from the consequences of their actions. And the Scott Pruitt example is a little bit of a different motivator, because that wasn't that exhilarating. That was a horrible experience, actually. But I think it represents another class of Republicans, why they go along with this, which is that this is people's career. I didn't know what else to do. Donald Trump had won. I'd been a vocal Donald Trump opponent. I thought my life was in shambles. I thought my career was in shambles. I didn't know what I didn't, should I keep doing politics? Should I quit? Should I become a shepherd? Do I go back to college? Like, what do I do? Right. And Scott Pruitt calls and says, will you help me do the thing you've always done, do PR and kind of help me message me? I said yes, just basically out of inertia. Like, this is my life. I'm trying, I'm just moving the next rung up the ladder. I'm a mid-level person here. What is my obligation? And eventually I realized that I had too grave an obligation, and it took me too long, but I said to Pruitt, I can't give you advice anymore. Like, this is just too contrary to my values. But I think that there are a lot of people in Republican Washington who are working for people like Kevin McCarthy, who this is their justification. They did, like, what else am I supposed to do? Like, this is my career. I'm like a mid-level oil man after a spill. Do I quit my job? Do I go in the next day? And I think
So,
that's part of the rationalizations.
okay, so Tim, I'll cut you some slack. As far
Thank
as
you.
I know, you're not independently wealthy, you had to make a living. But you write about Todd Ricketts, who my viewers know. He lives in the Chicago suburbs. He is the co-owner of the Cubs. He comes from a fabulously rich family, and they are active in up until Trump ran in 2016. They were involved in putting a lot of money into fiscal conservative causes. And then they fund, through his mother, Marlene Ricketts, an anti-Trump super PAC. You get a call from one of his guys, and you go to work for it.
What was that pause? What was the dramatic pause there, Lynn? You get a call from one of his guys.
Uh, because the call, I think I get it,
Yeah.
that call. And my point being, you probably then might have, and in your writing, and so everyone knows, when Tim writes about it, it's not revelatory, but it's revealing that as soon as Trump gets the nomination, all of a sudden the Ricketts are on board. And here is my point, I guess, when I think about Todd Ricketts, he was on board. Trump forgave him. He was nominated to be a deputy commerce secretary, and the paperwork and financial disclosures didn't work out. So he ends up as a fundraiser for the RNC. And even after knowing everything he knows after Trump, he continues to be the chief fundraiser for the 2020 election cycle. Okay, so there are people like you and others who write about you got to make a living. So maybe I'm going to give you a break here. When you look at the class of Republicans and the donor class that supported Trump, what's your analysis of why they went along?
I love that you asked me about Todd. I could have done a whole chapter on Todd Ricketts, but
Yes.
people are like, most people are like, who cares about Todd Ricketts? But I did. It was fascinating. I thought I was,
We care
again,
about Todd.
yeah, it was also exhilarating, right? It was, they funded this anti-Trump super PAC. I was like, great, I get to do what I'm good at, which is attack and do PR and go on TV and joust with Trump supporters, and pitch oppo research on Trump, and I get to feel good about it because it's the right thing. It was such a cool job, and I was so lucky that Todd called me, and then you get invited to Cubs games, and right, you're in the mix. Is that right? About as a big draw about politics. And then Trump wins, and for him to call me a month later and say, "Ooh, we need to get back in his good graces. We're starting a pro-Trump PAC now. Do you want to be the spokesperson?" I was just like, that was insane to me. I said, our first PAC was called Our Principles PAC. like this is like Veep. Like, what was our principle if you're going to support Trump? And this is, I literally said this to him, Lynn. I was like, you are independently wealthy. You could do anything. You could join boards. You could move to an island and start a school for poor kids. You could just pick candidates. You could run for mayor. I don't know. You could do anything. The world is your oyster. And to want to be deputy commerce secretary or a fundraiser for someone that you just know that you knew was despicable, that you ran a PAC to stop, I it really did boggle my mind, and I had to spend a lot of time trying to think about it. And the reality is that this drug, this addiction of feeling important, of all those other suggestions, maybe not running for mayor, but you know,
Yeah.
being a board member, doing charity, starting a
For
nonprofit.
Senate, there's talk at one point that run for office in Illinois. If you have so many great ideas, run for
Yeah,
governor.
sure, but Illinois is a blue state. You're going to lose, right? Like this is an easy path to feeling important, and people like to feel important. I wish that there was a deeper answer to this. I wish that there was, that there was some. If you when you underneath peel away the onions, there was some really deep seated principle or some care. But it's not. It's like these guys and women in Elise's case, but it tends to be guys like to feel important. They like to be in the mix. They like to be invited to the White House. They like to be called secretary and and it's as simple as that. And it was easy for them to look past all of the damage that Trump was doing, because he wasn't really doing it to them. You're in this privileged bubble where there aren't really any consequences of your own actions. And so the whole thing was just devastating. I said, I don't know if I said it to Tom, I think I said it to one of his guys. I literally sent an email that was like, I would not accept the deputy commerce secretary job. Like, I'm just a random PR hack. I don't have, I don't have any family money, and I wouldn't take that job. Why do you want this job so bad? But that's it. Just this desire to be close to the White House, close to the action is what drives these guys.
So, do these forces exist to be duplicated as Trump contemplates 2024 with all the various controversies swirling about him?
Yeah, absolutely.
As your book goes through, it's like the stages of grief. Well, maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe it is so bad. Maybe we could help. And again, readers, this book is very readable because it is part memoir, and we've had authors on who are taking more of a historical bent, or have inside information, which Tim does, but because it's his own journey kind of laid on the reporters, the reportage for somebody who's on the inside, which is kind of cool because you knew the ground. So we're set the stage now where you think we're at with Trump, who cannot do it alone, no matter the cult-like power he has. Doesn't he still need the band of operatives and supporters, or what? What do you think?
Yeah, I tried very hard to make the book not homework. That was one of my top goals.
Very
a lot of these books are homework, so I'm glad
I can't read
glad that landed.
because you have some, four-letter words here. But anyway,
I do cut. I do. When my aunt said, "Did you have to cuss so much?" I was like, I was just trying to be real. I could have probably dialed back the cussing a little bit. Anyway, look, the what I come to is you give the example of the stages of grief. I would give the example. I don't know if you watch the show Squid Game, which is you're in all these levels where you're trying to get the money pot at the end, and they make you do all of these horrible things. You have friends that die, and I won't ruin the show, but the conceit is basically that you're already in so deep, it's like hard to then take a moral stand to leave, right? Like once you've already sacrificed so much, and what my book tries to get across is that all of these people, all of the rationalizations they had that got them to January 6th, because they all knew Trump was bad before January 6th. It wasn't like, oh, this big revelation on the 6th that Trump was dangerous. Like they all knew that, but they all had rationalized it using these various different reasons. And so maybe for a day or two after January 6th, like their consciences broke through, or their, they thought they had this off ramp. But once they realized the voters still wanted Trump, they went back to the same rationalizations. Like the whole reason that they got there hadn't changed. And so as far as 2024 is concerned, as long as the bottom up problem, unless the operatives have the courage, the to say no to him and to stop him, and there's no evidence that they will, then they will continue to go along with this as long as the voters demand him. And in the Republican Party right now, maybe it's softening a little bit, but he still has a huge following, a majority following among the supporters. And so I do think that maybe not every single person, I tell the story of Alyssa Farah, there'll be some outliers, but most of these same people will go along with it.
Right. We have it in a sense. If you watch MSNBC and CNN, we see some of the Trump people who have evolved into never Trumpers. But before we forget, I want to devote a chunk of time to Adam Kenzinger and this
Yeah.
and their futures. And again, so our listeners know, when Adam Kenzinger first launched, this was in January 2021. I remember that you and I were on the same call where Kenzinger talked about a movement he was launching in the wake of January 6th. And I think by then, had he voted to impeach? Was the impeachment vote? Might have happened by then, or it was
I
about
think
to.
it had happened. Yeah, I think it had happened.
He kind of he morphed from somebody who yin and yanged about Trump, voted for him, didn't, kind of liked, we, let me remind people, and I think I wrote stories about it, Trump really liked him at one time, and he was at the White House because he is a good-looking guy who comes out of central casting as a military officer / member of Congress, and Trump loved that. And I think Trump kind of liked the swashbuckling aspect of him. But then, boy,
And likes winning people over.
yeah,
Likes winning people over. Feels like you own him. If someone had criticized him and then starts to like him, he likes that.
right. But Trump couldn't own Kinzinger, and he started this battle against conspiracies, which turned into a battle against denialism, which turned into accepting an appointment on the January 6th committee with Liz Cheney, and we'll get to her in a minute. So again, he is finishing up his term in Congress. The Democrats remapped Illinois, and he just was in a bad position. He lived a little too far north to, get a district. The Democrats didn't care if they threw him in with another Republican, but probably no matter what he did, he would have had a hard time surviving a primary.
Yeah.
Now, we're in a state where the biggest Trump supporter, a freshman by the name of Mary Miller, beat another Trump-friendly incumbent, Rodney Davis. So, that gives you an example of Illinois politics. In the governor's race, Darren Bailey, who had Trump's blessing, even though it came a little late, he beat the other Republicans. Anyway, what do you think Kinzinger does for his future?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to give you real talk. Adam and I are friends, so he hears from me directly, and so I'm just going to say it. And we have disagree on some things, but it comes from respect. I tried to convince him to run against Trump in 2020 to primary him. Joe Walsh ends up doing it, another Illinois guy, but I thought that he would be nothing against Joe, but a little more credible, a little more serious of a challenge. I figured he would lose, but I thought would be a good kind of platform for a future. And we could take a few bites out of him. He didn't choose to do that, I think, for good reason. You take a lot of heat for a losing effort. And so now I think I love what he's doing with this little PAC, trying to help Republicans who are not conspiracists at these low-level spots, Secretary of State, city of, auditor, these sort of jobs that we didn't used to think were that important. Then all of a sudden, you have guys like Stephen Risher in Arizona and Brad Raffensperger who are like standing between us and autocracy. So I do think it's important that we have sane Republicans in those lower level spots. I think that's a good project for him, though. And I think this is where we kind of disagree. I don't think that there is a path left in the Republican Party for somebody that has been this harsh on Trump. And I do think that the Democrats would be more welcoming. And this is true. We can tie this into the Liz Cheney thing. Look, you looked at the Liz Cheney third party run. There was a poll out the other day, and all of her voters were Biden.
Yeah.
People like she took entire, she had like 11%, and they were all people that in a two-way would have been Biden. She didn't take from Trump at all. So I do think there's a center-left Democrat, suburban Democrat in the right district. They wouldn't mind taking a former Republican in certain districts. Probably not statewide in Illinois, but I think that there are targeted places where that might work. I think that, he still has some conservative views, doesn't want to do that. I get that. But I just think within the Republican Party right now, his position is not tenable. I think what he's done is super brave. I like what he's doing with his PAC, and we'll see. But I kind of think that's where things stand.
So Liz Cheney vowed that she'll do anything to make sure Trump is never reelected president. If she ran, then all she would do is help that cause if he were the nominee, because she would take votes from Biden. So,
and a third party. Oh, well, I think you could conceivably, she could run we'll see what she wants to do. She could run a Republican primary, and again, that'd be a kamikaze mission. But
Yeah.
could you raise the salience of Trump's corruption? If he's running a prime unopposed, or if he's running against somebody that's just a suck up, they're never going to talk about it. So if she's out there running ads on Fox News, can you peel off 3-4%? She got 20 something percent
Right.
in her
So,
primary. That's not a lot, but Democrat or to sit out. So I think she could play a meaningful role that way.
so do you think the Florida Governor DeSantis gets in, even if Trump does, or is he just huffing? Is he just setting himself up if Trump doesn't run?
Yeah.
What do you
And
think?
he's clearly the natural successor right now. I don't know if that's forever. We'll see how the midterms go. Sometimes new stars emerge. I just don't even want to say some of the names of some of these horrible people that are running as Republican little
Because
Trump imitators now. But like, I don't know, Carrie Lake or somebody wins, and who knows? But DeSantis taking on Trump directly, it could conceivably work. We do focus groups at the Bulwark with Trump voters all the time, and we hear from they don't dislike Trump. They're not interested in Kenzinger at all. Like, Kinzinger's a traitor, right? He's like the enemy of the people to these people. But some of them might say, well, I like Trump, but it'd be nice if he just moved aside with his baggage and we could have DeSantis, and he was a nice cheerleader. That could happen
if you want
conceivably.
if you want an election denier and a conspiracy monger, um, get DeSantis, who at least
Yeah.
is crazy in terms of governing, who at least isn't trying to. I mean, it's a shame that we have to even get to this level. It does strike me.
It's a low bar.
Yeah, filling that in. So, Pence, what's his future? None.
None. I wish he would testify. I don't understand why he won't testify, and I wish Liz Cheney. I think Liz Cheney, for me, she's gotten an A, and she'd get an A plus for me as she was putting more public pressure on Pence and some of these other guys to testify publicly in front of the January 6th committee. Pence still thinks he has a future. I just don't see it. He's really in the sour spot with these voters. The tiny percentage of Liz Cheney voters in the party, they don't like Mike Pence. The MAGAs don't like Mike Pence, and even the people who are in the kind of I like Trump but I'm ready to move on, that kind of middle category, DeSantis is much more appealing to them than Pence. And there are going to be a number of other people that are. So I just never say never. Who the hell knows? Trump dies and blah blah blah. But right now there's not a really clear path for Mike Pence within the party.
Speaking of MAGA, so Joe Biden has taken to saying MAGA Republicans. He means it as a slur, a put down. I don't see what the point is, because who does it help? It doesn't seem to hurt. All it does is what? It doesn't even seem that clever to spit out MAGA Republicans, because the MAGA Republicans will probably only feel emboldened by it, or what? What's the
point? I think he's grasping around. I also don't love it, but it's a real descriptor, right? If you look at the party right now, it's about 50% of what I would say these Trump Republicans, MAGA Republicans. They like Trump more than they like conservative old values. About 40% are like traditional conservatives, Christian conservatives who like Trump, and then about 10% are whatever, relatively anti-Trump or hostile. So it describes a portion of the party. And I think that what Biden and the Democrats are trying to do is say to that tiny 10% of Republicans and the swing voters, don't trust these 50%. They're the real loons, like they're the real crazies. And so I think he's trying to find a way to explain that in a bumper sticker. But I agree that doesn't really land.
So right now, more Republican states and Republican governors are moving to make more restrictive abortion laws.
Yeah.
We saw what happened in Kansas, New York, Congressional District 19. The Democratic, who wasn't supposed to win, won, though he seemed like an appealing candidate, military, but he made abortion the main issue. Is this going to backfire on Republicans? They got what they wanted, or is it of limited value, do you think?
No, I think so. And I think it didn't necessarily have to be this way. I don't. People forget. I think number one, it was going to engage Democratic partisans no matter what. So that was already going to happen. But a second thing has happened, right? People don't realize that about the big middle of the country is actually mixed on abortion. I know you don't. There are none of these people on cable TV, except for me. I think I would be the only one on all cable that holds these views. But there are a lot. Most of the country is like for abortion in certain cases that should be legal in certain cases, and there should be certain reasonable limits. Late second trimester, third trimester, whatever. That's the majority position. Okay. So had Republicans stuck with that and done their like 20-week bans, 25-week ban with exceptions, do a more European proposal. It's similar to what Youngkin maybe is proposing in Virginia. I do see, I think, in Arizona. I don't think that would have hurt them that much. It would still, Democrats still would have been engaged more, so it might have hurt them a little bit on the edges. But what we're seeing in Kansas is the actual position of no exceptions, 1 week ban. That is like a 10% position. No one's for that except for very active Republicans, right? Arizona, these swing states. If they have governors running on no exception bans, that is putting them in a very, very bad position. And I think it's going to cost Republicans more than the insurrection in a few places around the country, for sure.
Well, will it cost Democrats right now in the Illinois governor primary and in a few other places? The Democrats went in and played in the Republican primary to get the Trumpiest person nominated. I think it's playing with fire because even if they lose, they still have given credentials to someone as the leader of their pack. When we look at the larger threat of Trumpism, is there a problem for you in this Democratic strategy as someone who knows, as you would call it in your book, the game of politics?
Yeah. I don't love it. But here's the thing that I try to get at in my book about the politics is still going to be a competition, right? The game that got out of control that I'm critical of is just this nihilism, not caring about the voters, not caring about what the potential impact of your actions could be. And I do think in certain cases, like in the Peter Meyer primary, what the Democrats were doing was really over the line.
And that's in Michigan.
That's in Michigan. Yeah. I'm a little bit more of a mixed view on like the Illinois governor's race. It's extremely unlikely the Republican's going to win that race regardless. If he does, it's not as if Illinois in a presidential year is going to be the state that our democracy hinges on, right? In the way that some of these swing states are. I just think it's kind of like a lower risk play. I don't love the karma of it still. But I understand why Democrats trying to be aggressive. I just think they need to be a little bit more careful. Pennsylvania is a different situation, right? Like that guy, Doug Mastriano. Let's say Trump once again in 2024, and it all comes down to Pennsylvania, and they change the rules with this super ultra pro-insurrection governor to really to do voter suppression laws and change the way votes are counted. That's really playing with fire in a way that I don't like. So to me, it's a case-by-case situation.
On it. So I want to get back to Trump and all these investigations besides. So we have January 6th probe that will resume in a few weeks. Justice Department. The latest is whatever will happen from taking documents, the FBI raid. And again, so people know, presidents don't own documents. They're supposed to turn over everything. If this was in the White House and I have some scribbled notes, this would be logged and maybe digitalized, but you can't get rid of it. And Tim, you may not know this, but the Barack Obama Presidential Library exists in a suburb of Chicago in an old furniture store, because Obama decided he didn't want the official National Archives library in his Obama Center that he's building, but they had trucked the stuff up. But the stuff exists. Even though Trump said he shipped them to Chicago, NARA shipped them. My point being, what do you think exposes Trump more? I mean, is he still impervious to this? We have the Georgia grand jury going on right now, which is serious. Legal attempts to influence 2020. We have attempts in 2022 about making off with documents that aren't yours. And I know we make a big deal about them being classified or super secret. You shouldn't take them no matter what they are. So will any of this have an impact, you think, on Trump if he decides to run, or even on the midterm elections.
I think, well, the last one's an easier question. I think it's having some effect on the midterm elections because it's keeping Trump in the news and in a way that matters. Negative polarization. A lot of, so again, we talked about the Democratic voter engagement going up because of Dobbs,
Yeah.
and that's a proactive reason. But there are other Democrats who are really more engaged by negative partisanship. They're more likely to turn out if they think Trump and these crazy Republicans are going to be in charge than they do really care about Mark Kelly or whatever in Arizona. So I think that matters. It's helping the Democrats on the margins in the midterms. As far as whether Trump is impervious, I don't let myself have hope that he's going to be arrested. Lynn, he's obviously a criminal. I would love for him to be arrested. It would, make me a very happy man out here in Oakland. But we got to let all this stuff play out. Like, how can you find a jury that would be unbiased, that would be a jury of his peers? How do you even do that? I mean, we're really in unprecedented waters here, but that doesn't mean that the legal system shouldn't go and treat this just like they would treat plenty of other ex-politicians who have gotten in trouble. It's not like Trump is the first one. You've had a couple politicians over there who have been behind bars. So I just think we got to let it play out.
But one of the, you can't use the word unprecedented enough and rock bottom enough when you cover or report or work for Trump. And the phenomena, the ability of him to keep replicating successfully through the fundraising he's doing off of every one of his investigations, the people that still flock to him for a rally, they see his defects and they go along with it. But having said this, if we are gaming out a little bit in 2024, who would be his running mate? Who is it going to be? Mr. Pillow, Mike Lindell, someone like that? Who I noticed you didn't use his name when you wrote about him in the book. That you didn't use his name. Was that deliberate?
The Pillow Man. That's he's so ridiculous. Yeah, I think the only way to treat him is to mock him. He deserves mockery. But no, I don't know if it was intentional. Otherwise, I was trying to get a laugh. It's some very heavy stuff. So I do my best in the book to try to, give at least a little bit of dark humor for folks throughout. But his running mate, look at who is all still with him. Of course, he'll be able to get a running mate. He had 7 senators and 10 House members voted to impeach. Yeah. They've all come to his defense on this stuff. Even the relatively more on the normal side, the team normal, if you will, the Marco Rubio and et cetera, they've come to his defense. So I don't, I look at the women. I think that probably he wishes he had chosen a woman last time. And you got Carrie Lake, like I said, Elise. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Elise, Carrie Lake, I think, are 2 that jump to mind. Christy Nome. Yeah. I think he would have his choice, which is, again, insane that after watching that he sent a mob to essentially assassinate his vice president and has completely trashed him now in the fallout of that someone would sign up for that. But ambition's a hell of a drug, Lynn.
So we're winding down and we're in our closing moment here. So last question. Can Trumpism exist? When you have this blindness to reality in a sense, can this exist without Fox News just getting all in again as they did? Or can it exist to the power that it has and without having a Fox 100% behind it, if the powers to be at Fox, besides some of the nighttime hosts just say, we like DeSantis, less controversial, we could go with that. What's the media outlook?
Yeah, no, Fox has a huge impact. I had one chapter in the book on the media and how operatives deal with the conservative media because I thought it was important. I initially had 3, but I thought people would get bored. But that's how important I think it is. Conservative media is critical to his survival. So the question is, does it matter? Right? Like, I don't think that with Ailes gone, Fox doesn't have somebody who's like a strong hand at the top that could make everybody sing from the same hymn book on something like that. So I don't think it's like realistic to think Fox could just move on to DeSantis. But I would just say in closing, like the difference and a lot of the corruptibility and a lot of these base instincts that I talk about in my book are human instincts that have happened throughout time, but we've created a culture that I think has exacerbated them, a political culture. And you just look back to Nixon as the prime example of this. Does Nixon, it's an easy counterfactual. Does Nixon resign actually if he has a Fox News, if he has a Breitbart, if he has this whole social media apparatus of people who are supporting him and standing with him? I don't think so. We'll never really know, but I do think that Trump was propped up, and Trump's lies and his corruption and his illegal acts were insulated by this massive conservative media bubble that has developed over the last 30 or so years.
And with that, our time is coming to an end. Tim Miller, thank you, Tim Miller, the author of Why We Did It, a travelogue from the Republican road to hell. Take care, Tim.
Thank you, Lynn. It's been great.
More than a month ago, Highland Park Mayor Nancy Rotering and members of her city council started marching in the July 4th parade. I was there, and I saw them pass me by. A few minutes later, everything changed. A gunman, standing on the roof of a store in downtown Highland Park on Central Avenue, in the space of a minute, using an assault weapon, was able to fire 83 bullets, killing 7, wounding 48. Mayor Nancy Rotering found herself thrust in a position of guiding her community through and past the shock and trauma. Joining me now in the Highland Park City Hall is Mayor Nancy Rotering. Madam Mayor, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Lynn.
So we are speaking more than a month after the massacre, and people are already talking about having a memorial in this city. I was at the city council meeting in August where it came up. Could you just tell our viewers what the plans may be and what you have in mind?
Well, we know that we want to have a permanent place of remembrance, of reflection. Already we have had 3 memorials sort of spring up organically within the city near the site where the shooting occurred, and then also about a block away. And those have been sort of oasis for folks who are looking for a way to come together, to find peace. They've been listening to music and writing notes and so forth. But obviously we'll need something that will withstand time and Chicago weather.
So one of the things that is so striking about this, and as I said, we were both there and I reported on it, was I knew from the moment I realized what happened that this is a suburb that had an assault weapon ban, and it was obvious from the carnage that it was highly likely, it was later proved to be true, that that kind of weapon was used. So this was in 2013. You battle it up and down to the highest court, and you have one. So you have said this ban is really, it speaks for itself. Highland Park is just an island. As we speak, it's pretty clear that Congress is not going to move any further. I covered you when you were in Washington at that Senate Judiciary Committee, and I saw how the Republican senators just resisted, in a sense, almost everything you were saying. You seemed, what is your reaction to that? Do you think there's a way that you could get around it, or does it mean you just shift to seeing what you could do in the state?
I felt undaunted, frankly. I was appalled, I was disgusted. I couldn't believe that people were disrespecting our willingness to share our experience. We are all Americans. We, I would hope, all view life as sacred, and to not even give us the respect of hearing our detailed situation and our stories, to me, seemed frankly like a breach of their responsibility. That being said, I've spoken to numerous mayors, not just in Illinois, but across the country, not just those who've been impacted by mass shootings, but those who fear mass shootings. And we know that all the mayors have that adage of it's not if, but when. And they're on all sides of the political spectrum. They're furious. they recognize that the horror, the physical pain, the emotional agony, all of the detrimental things that come with a mass shooting are any-day occurrences in this country, and they're furious that nobody is taking this to the highest level and getting the job done. So to me, we're not daunted. We are going to continue to pursue this through the mayors, through state legislators, and see what we can achieve and move this ball forward. It's all we can do to get these combat weapons out of this country.
Finally, as we wrap this up, will there be a July 4th parade next year?
So we're still talking about what is appropriate in terms of the year remembrance of this horror coming to Highland Park. In my mind, we will have a ceremony in the morning and recognize and talk about those that we lost and those who are still recovering. And again, there are people who will be recovering for the rest of their lives. And I'm not sure what will happen after that. So we'll keep you posted.
Mayor Nancy Rodering, thank you very much for joining us at the Table.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you. We're under a open air structure right by the train tracks, down the block from the epicenter of the attack. When did this start to get created?
I want to say maybe a week after the shooting, 2 guys from California put the altars up of the victims, the digital altars. And it seemed to me that people were arriving in silence and sadness and leaving in silence and sadness. And I guess I kind of just thought that seemed a little sadder than it needed to be. So I came the next morning and I tied a ball of yarn to each one of these pillars. And as people came to the memorial with their flowers and their teddy bears and their candles, I just asked them, do you want to wrap this post? And people said, yes. So my installation actually was at the Highland Park Art Center just a block away. And that's 30,000 pieces of orange fabric that represent all the kids who've been killed since Sandy Hook. And before it was at the Art Center, it was actually down in Inglewood for the Wear Orange Peace Rally. And before that, it was on the lawn of the United States Capitol. So the piece was here already. And we had an event with Moms Demand Action and Students Demand Action. And we actually read the Texas names. And we said this just as easily could have been our own kids. And then 9 days later, it was.
So this work of public art started with some other people just putting the pictures in the little altar of the victims. And as you said, you came here, you thought there was more, and you started rapping. We now see all these messages from people, flowers.
People have written, there are over 6,000 notes now that are here on these columns.
One, it doesn't say who it's from, but it says, change can happen, but it must begin with us, with you. Spread smiles, not bullets. Learn to use your words to resolve conflicts. Be kind. Give a hug to someone who needs it.
What is it that you've been trying to do with this space?
We've been trying to create a space that is healing, restorative, warm, peaceful, and also empowering. The goal is to channel anguish into action. And if we can do that, if we can transcend this experience, not move on, but move forward, we will have done a very important thing. And I think we're at the cusp of systemic change.
Jacqueline Van Edeker, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
July 4th was one of the first times that we took our 2 very small children out since this pandemic started. We have a 3 and a 1-year-old, and my husband manages the Gearhead store, so I came with my in-laws and my 2 children to watch the parade while my husband kind of popped in and out of work. So we were right here between Ross Cosmetics and Gearhead.
We had the parade right out here, right off Central. So I just made sure to swing out every once in a while just to see how the family was doing, how the kids were enjoying the parade.
My daughter started to fuss, so I was going to bring her into my husband's store so she could run around a little bit, my 1-year-old, and that's when I heard what I thought were the sound of fireworks, and very quickly became aware that that's not what it was that I was hearing.
And I turned around thinking, what moron is blowing off fireworks at this kind of event? And I turned around, but there was nobody behind me.
I actually looked up on top of the roof and saw the gunman crouched down, aiming at people, and I shouted to the crowd around me that I had seen a gunman and to get down. I think it was like right over here, and so I got down with my daughter close to my chest.
Standing right about here, because the crowd is up in front, the family's up in front, part of the family's over there, and I am just, I'm watching what's going on. The shots go off, I turn back, and I take a piece of shrapnel. So he must have hit over here, and I took a piece of shrapnel into my leg there. And then I feel the rest of everything happening around me. I turn back around this way, and I see a branch fall from the tree up there as it lands. And then we are all starting to run at that point.
As I was running into the store with my daughter in my hand, I felt something sharp graze my side. And the adrenaline was so strong at that point that I had recognized the pain, but it wasn't as scary as like, is my daughter hit? Is the rest of my family okay? At the time, all I knew was to protect my daughter, and I didn't have time to look around and ensure that my son was safe in my mother-in-law's arms. So my biggest concern at that point was not that I was injured, but that if I had gotten hit, was my daughter hit that was in my arms. So, later on I felt the pain a little bit more, but the adrenaline really prevented me from feeling too much.
I just remember my instinct was exactly like my dad said. You see people running, and your first instinct is to just try and corral as many people as you can in. My dad came in, my wife and daughter were followed, and then my mom and son came in. They were the last ones. But that was just kind of the big thing, was how do we get as many people in here, and what are we running from?
We look out the window, and then we witness individuals that are down on the ground. There's a lovely older lady who is stumbled on the ground out here. I come out to pick her up and bring her into the store.
We had people that were grazed, we had people that had minor injuries, we had people that had fallen, that were scraped up. So it was from shrapnel to just bumps and bruises.
I initially thought that I was grazed by a bullet, but after kind of looking at it and having the paramedics look at it, it does look like it was shrapnel that had ricocheted off something and hit me. So there's an abrasion on my side, and immediately there was bruising all around it. And then so the few days later, there was a lot of bruising, and I still have a scar from the abrasion on my side. They did bring me outside, right outside of Ross, to be triaged, and that's when it really sank in, was seeing the injuries around me. They gave me gloves, and I applied pressure to a woman's leg, because I was like, I'm the last that needs to be looked at here. I'm fine. They just gave me gloves, and they were like, can you apply pressure to her leg? And so I was able to do that while all the other medical professionals were running around.
Tony and I witnessed them put the gentleman into the ambulance that expired on his way to the hospital.
I had a month to kind of process everything, kind of at home by myself. Being a teacher, I had that 1 month left of summer to be with my kids and do that. And so this last month has really been a lot of getting reacclimated into the routine of working and walking into a school every day where these things happen. It's like my school has had to create accommodations for me as if they would for a student. Even today we had a fire drill. They let me stand outside before the fire drill so I don't have to be around the loud noises. We have our first lockdown drill this Friday, so there's no way I can be in the school during that. So they're letting me leave for a little bit and come back while somebody covers my classroom. My son brings it up from time to time. We're thinking about sending him to therapy just to see what's going on in his brain. It's hard with my daughter. A lot of her behaviors are different now, but we're not sure if it's just a stage she's going through. I honestly don't think our children have slept through the night once since this happened. And again, we don't know if that's a stage that they're going through or whether it's something to do with this, and to get that out of my daughter would be really difficult. So anticipating how this trauma might play out in their lives is something that weighs heavily on my heart a lot.
On July 4th, you were at Green Bay and Central. It's about 10:14 a.m. and the Highland Park High School band had just marched by you. Then what happened?
They started running and I didn't understand it. And one of the band members said, "There's a shooter." So I went into military mode and I raised my arms and told people in the crowd to clear the street. I then radioed in to my commander that this is Sir Lamort, I'm coming in. There was a policeman right to my left running at full speed, so I knew something was terribly happening.
And so the scene is right by Walker Brothers Pancake House by Port Clinton Square. And what did you see?
I saw people running. I saw bodies that were unresponsive. I saw medics. I saw firemen. I saw policemen. I saw civilians. I saw things that I'm trying to put aside.
Have you walked down to the scene since then?
I have several times.
And I know I was on the scene too because I walked into it, and I know I have seared into my memory what I saw at the time. I wonder, how is it like for you?
You know what? It's almost cleansing. It's like I needed to see it again, just so that I could work through it.
We're seated right by the memorial here, and people come. And tell me the story of how you met two of the people who were among the 48 wounded and reconnected with them.
I met one of their cousins, and I had been talking about two people that I helped, and she's like, "I know them." So we agreed to meet here. I went and grabbed the city manager because I wanted to do everything by the book. And we came here, and it was such a nice feeling.
What does it mean now when you're an emergency responder, volunteer to help at events, certainly an event of this magnitude, probably unimaginable, and then you meet the people who you helped? Does that help you move ahead, or were you just curious about what happened to them?
No, absolutely. I wanted to have that completion, to see even if they remembered me. I mean, the trauma that went on, who knows? And when I walked in, she remembered me, and so did her father. And it was just such a wonderful, warming feeling.
And what does it mean to come to this memorial that is here for now?
I come here every day. I get up in the morning, I just come down and straighten up what I can. But to me, it's been like a therapy. I come here in the afternoon, and people want to talk about what their experience was. And they hear that I was a first responder, so they feel comfortable talking to me. That's helped me tremendously.
Well, as time goes on, the best to you. Kathy Lamort, thank you very much for joining me
My
and
pleasure.
telling me your story.
I'm glad I was where I was when I was there.